Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guests today are Philip George. He's Director of Cybersecurity at the National Nuclear Security Administration. Chris Cleary is Chief Information Security Officer at the Department of the Navy. And Marty Edwards is Vice President for Operational Technology Security at Tenable. And I'm your host, Tom Temin. We're going to discuss this whole idea of the possible convergence, whether virtually or physically, of operational technology and information technology. The premise being that they both have cybersecurity issues because as history moves ahead, operational technology is increasingly IP, almost the same delivery mechanism as information technology. Long gone are the specialized protocols that used to be in manufacturing and factories. So why don't we start with Mr. George of NNSA. Give us a sense of what your infrastructure looks like and how you view it in terms of the information technology and the operational technology, and what your general governance is for that. Are they separate? Are they moving together? Give us the picture here.
Okay, thanks, Tom, and thanks for having me on today. At NNSA, we have, I guess, a full spectrum of operational technology systems. We spent some time working in both internally with our policy and governance organization, as well as with our partner organizations within DOE and across our plants and labs to kind of bound the space. When we looked at the operational technology environment in and of itself, we initially thought that it would just contain the mission systems that are purpose-built and or support the mission of the NNSA as a whole. But we very rapidly realized that this also entails business automation and building automation systems, and as well as life safety systems that are utilized across our environment. And so the breadth and scope of the problem space expanded rapidly. And to be honest, it was a little bit overwhelming. But we thankfully, we're able to kind of re-strategize and look at who the players were in each of these areas that as an OCIO shop, we normally did not play in. And what information and or subject matter expertise would we require in order to, one, understand and characterize these environments rapidly, two, develop a way to ingest, if not bring in these systems within our portfolio without increasing or adding undue risk to the operation, and three, adding one more sector of the triad. We're very familiar with confidentiality, integrity, and availability for systems. But when you're dealing with life safety and or emergency control systems within a building or facility, safety is paramount. And so there's that fourth quadrant there that we have to consider when we're trying to protect these information systems, and that we're not actually losing any ability to provide protection around.
So in other words, in that environment, which can be very, very highly critical, especially when dealing with nuclear weapons and so forth, the building itself becomes almost part of the matrix because the air conditioning and the environmental conditions really support the work being done by a lot of the machinery. That's
correct. The environmental conditions are controlled as you would expect in some of these production and fabrication environments. More importantly, from a fire suppression system, for that matter, not just in a production environment, but just for our greatest asset, our people, the individuals running and operating these environments. They're few and far between. They're highly trained, highly specialized, and they're not easy to backfill. And so we want to make sure that the life safety systems that are supporting and protecting them are equally as resilient, available, and safe.
Okay, and Chris Cleary, the Navy has a particularly complex environment. You've got, of course, ashore facilities, you've got floating facilities, and you've got a very large ground contingent that supports all of this. And especially at sea, I guess fire suppression is almost as important as almost anything else that happens on a ship. So give us a sense of the Navy as a whole and where are some of the areas you're concentrating on, and again, how you view operational versus informational and where they cross and converge.
Yeah, again, and Tom, again, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to do these things. I particularly like trying to get the sort of the vision and mission of what the Navy is attempting to do out to the public. So, the Navy's on a journey right now. For those of you who have probably been tracking what's been going on in the Navy, even before we dive into IT or OT, there was the cyber readiness review, which highlighted the fact that the Navy could be doing a better job as it pertained to cyber risk across the breadth and scope of what we do. So as we stood up the Don CIO office, they established the CISO at that level for the first time. And there is a breadth and scope of sort of what the job entails goes all the way from, information technology, all the way across the spectrum to operational technology. Now, as the Navy's been, the Navy's been around for 200 years, lots of these communities have been built up from the ground up. And it's really the understanding of all these different communities and dependencies that we have on each other. So you called it out. The Navy currently has 71 shore installations that are comprised of over 80,000 facilities, individual buildings, which have somewhere in the north of 300,000 control systems, which you could probably 2 or 3 or 5x that number when you got to the different control devices, the actual pieces of equipment that are inside these facilities. So just from a standardization standpoint, and that's just facilities. The Navy has an aspirational goal to get to 355 ships right now, through a variety of classes. Even when you get down to something like the Arleigh Burke class destroyer, there's as many versions of that destroyer. It's not just one thing that has been reproduced over and over again. Even those systems, the systems on board those ships are unique sometimes to that ship, and then let alone to class. A naval ship at the end of the day is just a big floating piece of operational technology. Everything inside of that ship is in one way or another connected, not always interconnected to the internet, but these systems of systems that allows these platforms to function as designed is incredibly complex. The dependencies that those systems have, even when they're when they're afloat and at sea, on shore installations is not always obvious. But when it comes to, let's say, Navy Facilities Command, which is closely tied with Navy Supply Command, what are all the systems involved with maintaining those ships at sea, getting them supplies, getting them fuel oil, getting them food, getting them repair parts, being available to give them maintenance availabilities when they get back in. So as we're standing up the Don CIO, which is now one of our principal concerns is operational technology, industrial control systems. But for the traditional IT world that is now beginning to move in there, granted, there's a learning curve that has to take place because the CISO community has not always been the one responsible for information technology security in association with those systems. So there's a very steep learning curve. And on the other side, the people that have been building these industrial control systems have not always had security at the forefront of the way they were designed. So I call it sort of a pleasant clash of civilizations. Both sides have acknowledged they need the other right now, but there is a language barrier that needs to be overcome. There is an understanding of certain roles and responsibilities that's still being worked out. But it is a massive undertaking within the Navy, and we are putting a lot of effort behind this right now.
Yeah, it sounds like the people who weld have to get together with the people who solder, maybe is a way to put it.
And very much so. That's a good way to say it, yeah.
Let's turn to you, Marty Edwards of Tenable, and what do you see across government in your efforts to understand this idea of this convergence in OT and IT?
Yeah, thank you, Tom, and thanks for having us on. I'm a little bit of a unicorn, I guess, in regards to Chris's explanation. The first 15 years of my career, I basically designed, built, and maintained those systems as an industrial control systems engineer. And then the last half of my career I've spent on securing them. So I've got a foot in each one of those worlds, and it is very rare to have people that are cross-trained in that manner. When you look at the US government, all of these different departments and agencies have just massive swaths of both information technology and operational technology, the SCADA systems, the distributed control systems, building management, the list goes on. And of course, we've kind of lumped all that together as operational technology. There's several problems. I mean, a lot of the operational technologies were purchased with lifespans of decades in mind, right? So although you get a new laptop every 5 years, just because, these systems don't upgrade that fast, and as a consequence of that, they don't have the latest patch, or they don't have the latest and greatest software running on them, which in some cases can make them more vulnerable. In the aspect of convergence, I think that some of this convergence in this domain has happened almost organically or by osmosis. the devices are out there and they just happen to get connected to whatever networks are handy. And so for some of these installations, it can be very difficult to get your arms around what assets are on the network, what risk do they pose to the network, and you really need to have special purpose-built technology to be able to do that. So the convergence is real. People talk about it as if it's a future thing. It is not. It is here. And there's a convergence in all of the different domains of people, process, or governance and technology. So, Chris talked about the people, kind of convergence, and Philip talked about some of the convergence of the equipment in the NNSA. So, I think that we have to address this as a community. It can't be done solely by the asset owner or the government department. It can't solely be done by the equipment manufacturer. It can't solely be done by a security vendor like Tenable. It has to be done as a community effort, and we all have to contribute.
All right. Well, it sounds like a pretty knotty problem. And Philip, let's go back to you for a minute. What are some of the strategies that you are employing to do the risk assessment? And I guess it can get fairly technical because, say, you've got a new IT system and that's got the latest operating systems that are supported by the vendor. Some of the older systems or SCADA systems or non-IT types of systems that are now on the internet or connected may have an image based on an operating system that's old and no longer supported. This kind of thing can happen. So how do you go about figuring out what your cyber risks are across all those domains?
So, our approach is it's kind of a cross-cutting approach, actually, where we're looking at each of the different or disparate mission spaces within our agency because their application of operation technology varies, right? But the goal here is to obtain the appropriate context of how a given mission first leverages operational technology, because the last thing we want to do as a cyber organization is introduce a requirement that doesn't take into account the impact to the ability to perform and or deliver the mission requirement. That's what we're here for. We're here to protect the mission. And so we have to partner. We have to partner with the mission owners and identify the one or two individuals who can properly characterize a given environment and provide the appropriate context from an availability, integrity, or confidentiality perspective. And then we can do what we do best, which is conduct an assessment, a risk assessment. Once that's said and done, and both parties have the ability to evaluate what the desired controls are and the perceived impacts are going to be, then the next question is looking at what tools are out there to actually implement and enable the strategy. And the issue that we deal with there is, and as Marty's kind of alluded to, the problem's been here, but we really haven't been looking or paying attention to how to deal with it. And so some companies in partnership, like public-private partnerships between us and them, are starting to move in the right direction, develop tooling and capability that cyber is accustomed to and familiar with, but is properly built to deal with legacy, if not antiquated systems, be it serial, bus, or IP-based, and enable the ability for a given operational technology or cyber shop to come in and gain visibility into what was previously an opaque environment.
So basically,
but that's our approach.
You look you look at the outcome desired based on the mission and go inward toward the technology rather than starting with the technology and moving outward, basically.
Absolutely. The technology and how expansive of an environment it tends to be deployed therein can be it's a little overwhelming for that matter. And so we have to look at the components or the sections of that environment that are critical to the mission and start from there. Over time, we may be able to bound the whole space, but initially, doing something is better than nothing. There's definitely risk that has to be mitigated. There are definitely higher priority components within an OT environment than others. And so from a mission perspective, what are the areas that have the greatest consequence to the mission being either unable or able to execute? And we start from there. And we take that methodology and spread across and run in parallel across the mission space.
Okay, we're going to ask the same question of Chris Cleary, but first we're going to take a small break here. This panel discussion is Cybersecurity Risks in Information and Operational Technology. sponsored by Tenable here on Federal News Network.